This is the Washington Post reporting at the time. They said Muslims have, this is the name of the piece, Muslims have a problem. Uncle Ruslan may have the answer. Sarney became Uncle Ruslan to millions of Americans watching him on TV and later online, winning their respect, first with apology and then with his hands clenched, fierce indignation, outrage, and anger over the suspected role of his nephews as the Boston Marathon bombers. But that's not, that's not exactly who this man was.
Yeah, there was some weird stuff where, he gets asked by the, press, what he does for work, and he just says that he works. He doesn't say where. Very cagey about that.
That's such a good answer.
Yeah, and so, people started digging into this, and it turns out that, so he lived in Kazakhstan, as we mentioned. The two sisters of the Sarnai brothers, and Tamerlan lived with him briefly while they were seeking asylum in the U.S. So he had actually worked in Kazakhstan, and in kind of in the general, in the Central Asia region, for energy companies. A lot of them were Halliburton connected companies. And so in 2005, he later becomes this executive at this company called Big Sky Energy Corporation.
I'm sorry, that is like a classic cutout name of just the most basic, simple sounding Big Sky Energy Corporation.
It gets better, Liz. It gets better. God. So the reason I bring this up is because they did this press release, and it's one of the good sources of information about Uncle Ruslan. So to start with, Big Sky Energy Corporation is an international oil and gas company. And at the time, 2005, they were trying to develop in the pre-Caspian Basin in Kazakhstan, which, is
Big Sky country.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's a huge, natural resource for oil. And this press release just mentions that he has been, he's worked for 10 years in oil and gas legislation and corporate law. And it also mentions that for 2 years, starting in 1994, he worked for a holding company called Arthur Andersen LLP. And so that company would later be indicted in the Enron scandal. And then he also worked for a company called Financial Markets International LLC.
Okay, that is a fake. Financial Markets International. That's like I work for the Commerce Corporation.
That's like right up there with Business International Corporation.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
For biggest, CIA cutout names. But those two groups were contracted by U.S. aid for projects developing some
our
kind
parent
of
company.
Right, yeah. Developing some kind of security markets in Central Asia. So Uncle Ruslan was working in oil and gas and for USAID and for Halliburton connected companies in Central Asia in the 1990s.
All good, brother. Like, I mean, people, what, are you going to take food out of a man's mouth? Those are the only jobs you could get back then.
I mean, he got his start like working for PricewaterhouseCoopers, basically doing the privatization of state assets. He basically graduated with his law degree, I think in 1994 when the privatization was happening. I mean, he's like full comprador, like, just taking the money from Western corporations to be their agent, essentially.
Yeah.
And of course there's the his marriage relationship with a certain supposedly ex-CIA agent.
Yeah, so I mean that's the thing is I gotta say, if you're a guy in a Uncle Sarney or an Uncle Ruslan type position, the kind of woman that you want to bag as soon as possible is I'm going to assume I didn't actually look up a picture of her, but I'm going to assume the ravishing daughter of CIA agent and let's say Eurasianist, even though I don't know if that's really the most correct way to call him. Let's Caucasusist Graham Fuller, because he married Graham Fuller's daughter, and they were married for around 5 years. They lived in, I think it was Kazakhstan together or Kyrgyzstan, but they lived in one of the K stands together. And no, I'm not talking about BTS fans. And they were married for about 5 years, and it seems like he was actually, he was fairly close with Fuller as well.
I think that they lived in Graham Fuller's house for a time in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
before they got their own place. So yeah, I mean, Graham Fuller says that he knew Russell pretty well.
Well, it seems like they also lived together in Maryland, where Graham Fuller was also based. And also pretty much everyone who works for the US government is based or has a base. In Maryland. And I believe that, Graham Fuller, he actually ran a company out of Maryland called the Congress of Chechen International Organizations, another classic name. And Uncle Ruslan Zarni was listed as the incorporated agent on the incorporation papers for that company.
So that company that Graham Fuller and Uncle Ruslan were running was giving resources to some Chechen groups. One of the leaders of one of these groups was named Sheikh Fathi, and he was providing support directly to the Chechen rebels, and would later actually introduce a man named Ibn al-Khattab to the Chechen conflict. And Ben, do you want to just give us a little detail about al-Khattab?
Yeah, people may recognize Ibn al-Khattab's name because he was the Chechen who was an Al-Qaeda affiliate, and he was the contact with Zacarias Moussaoui, the 20th hijacker. And this was the reason that Zacarias Moussaoui sort of came to the attention of the Minneapolis FBI office, which was then promptly suppressed so that Moussaoui would not be connected to the hijackings until after they had already happened.
I mean, to put this in perspective, it is pretty. I mean, all right, I get it. You know, the Caucasus are not the most populated region of the world here, right? But there are a lot of different sort of astounding coincidences that kind of have to happen in order for the daughter of a CIA agent to be married to the uncle of the Boston bombers.